Friday morning, NBL Now is back in your podcast feed, and I tell you what, a thrilling Thursday night hoops game between two of the big rivals in the competition in Melbourne and Sydney. It went all the way down to the very last play, and United getting it done by 2 points in the end. Joel Peterson and Damon Lowery with you on this Friday. Good morning to you, Damon.
JP, my man. Good morning, man. What a thriller. That was like a Michael Jackson thriller.
Yeah, it absolutely was. I want to start with a little bit of a question off-piste, so to speak. We're going to get a 2v3 playoff series that in all likelihood, even though Perth currently sit in third, it feels like, all season it's going to be one of Melbourne, Illawarra and Sydney that'll finish top. And then that 2v3 playoff series, we've had these great games between Melbourne and Sydney, between Sydney, Illawarra and Melbourne. What are you hoping for that 2v3 series is?
Wow, man. That semifinal is going to be so huge. All those teams, they rock fights, Joe. They are out and out slugfest of fights. Referees are letting a lot of things go from time to time. It's not always consistent, but whatever. That's life. But I'm looking at a Melbourne United team who found a little bit of their defensive mojo back. Just like the way they started off that game. So if it's Melbourne United in that second spot, which is currently looking that way, actually the pressure's on the Hawks to keep winning because Melbourne United could finish top. And now I think the Hawks will look at finishing second as a bit of a downer, a bit of a disappointment. Isn't that funny to say?
Yeah, absolutely it is. And, who knows? Play-in might mean that those teams don't make it into the 3v4 spots. It's going to be such a fascinating race down the stretch. So let's talk last night's game. Sydney trailed by as many as 20 in the third quarter. They rally back furiously. They do not lead at any stage. They get it tied up late in the piece. Isaiah Liafa hitting a big three, and then Jack White on the back cut. Beautiful pass from Matthew Dellavedova. Melbourne United go up by 2, and Sydney fall by that margin. But what were your impressions of the contest overall and how the closing stages unfolded?
Yeah, that was the game turned out to be a real absolute barn burner, real thriller. But to start off the game, the Kings just came out flat. And I could see with Melbourne United how they just had that bite back to their defense. Now, Melbourne United still don't score a whole lot of points, but you can see how active and committed they were on the defensive end, led by arguably the defensive player of the year again in Shea Ili. Shea Ili, man, like he took Jalen Adams completely out of the game. I mean, to the point that Brian didn't even want to play Jalen anymore. And while he was doing that on that end, Shea said, how would you like 20 points and 5 assists and 4 boards to go along with it? So Shea got him off to a great start. Obviously, Chris Golden hit a few 3 balls to just let him know who he was. But I just thought as a collective defensive unit, the Melbourne United showed signs.
We talk about the best scoring games of the season and that kind of thing. If you were looking for the best two-way game of the season, I reckon just tuck that one from Shea Ili into your back pocket and take it to the end of the year because it's going to be hard to do much more than slowing Jalen Adams down, who's been on an absolute heater, down to 7 points and then having 20 of your own at the other end.
What's going to be hard for Brian, and Brian already probably knows this, is my best player. Well, Xavier Cooks is the best player, but without Jalen being effective, and this is no way disrespect to Sean Bruce. I love Sean Bruce's game, but where your point's going to come from now? Brian basically played that game, JP, with no imports. One import couldn't pass the physical. The other import, Shea Ili had him in a sleeper hold. And the other import didn't play in the entire second half. Who are you going to beat? You know what I mean? So Xavier Cooks and Kawhi Noy, that's the team. And everybody else got to pitch in around them. And when the Sydney Kings are at their most dangerous is when they got that 5-out helter-skelter. Xavier Cooks playing bag-up point guard, spread the floor. No big can stay in front of Xavier Cooks. So that is their best basketball, but I don't think they can start off the game that way. It's going to be tough sledding from here on out from the Kings.
We'll come back to the Kings before we leave this one, but did you like what you saw from Melbourne United? Were there some positive signs there? Because there's been a lot talked about the rut that they've been in from their form perspective. Did it seem like the wheel was turning last night?
They definitely turned the corner, and again, it's always going to be on the defensive end. They're not an offensive octane, high octane team. They get a lot of they generate a lot of their offense from their defense. Because now once they get the stops, now they're running. And now Jack White is filling lanes, and he's getting alley oops and all type of stuff built off of the defense. Rob Lowe all of a sudden can be that trail big. They can hit a few threes. So offensively, nothing really changed all that much, but their defense definitely took it up a level.
And so another fascinating Brian Goorjian press conference again last night. So at one point he says, I don't like my starting group. It was a great question from our own Matt Russell, who does a great job of heading into the press conferences and passing through what's in the coaches' minds. But he talks extensively about the juxtaposition that he finds himself in at the moment between having the imports in the starting lineup in Oliver and Adams and them just not getting done what he needs from them. Jalen Adams got taken out of the game with about 7 minutes left after he got burned in transition. He was just standing there basically watching the referee and watching the ball. And Matthew Dellavedova races up the other end of the floor and lays it in. You mentioned Cam Oliver doesn't play in the second half. And Brian Goorjian saying, the closing group is the group that I want, and we need more out of the starters. So we keep psychoanalyzing his press conferences, but that's because he's got these conundrums that he's clearly working through at the moment to try and get the best out of this group.
And Brian Goorjian is a storyteller. Anybody that knows Brian and has seen his work of all the years that he's been here, he's a beautiful storyteller. His press conferences are podcasts. And first thing I do is click and see how many minutes am I going to get out of Brian today? 14, 15 minutes. Great. So, yeah, his starting lineup, he doesn't like it because his lead guard, and this was one of my early concerns with Jalen Adams. I feel that Jalen Adams is the best point guard in the league from a decision-making point of view. I never really considered Jalen that kind of a leader, like a vocal leader. He kind of just plays within himself. If the game is going a certain kind of way, Jalen Adams can tear that game to shreds. We've seen him do it. Xavier Cooks just recently called Jalen Mr. Fourth Quarter. That's how dynamite this dude is. But it's hard to play when you got Shea Illy and he got you in a sleeper hold and a straight jacket. It's hard to now generate that. So what does Jalen do now? How does he affect the game now? And he couldn't do it. So Brian, like you said, I'm glad you pointed that out too. So anybody who saw that game wondering how come Jalen didn't play, 7 minutes, 11 seconds roughly, he misses one of his patented kind of layups, and he just stopped, looked at the referee like, wasn't that a foul? Jogs back down the court. Ladies and gentlemen, Brian Goorjian hates when you jog back on defense. Deli ran right past him, got a layup. Brian called a timeout, and that was the last we saw of Jalen Adams. Brian just can't coach this way. This era of dude, yes, you could be an MVP of the league. You could be an NBL champion. But if your ass don't play defense all the time, Brian can't play you. So that was Jalen's fault. Now his finishing group, without Jalen, I thought Sean Bruce did a good job. And Sean is kind of like Shea Illy light in a way. Maybe without all the scoring that Shea provided, but he's going to get up and in. He can change the game from a defensive point of view. Now, Brian's conundrum. Do I start that group that finished? Can't wait to see what he do against Kansas.
Yeah, and you mentioned, you don't want to squash those imports in terms of what they bring to the team as well. So he's got an interesting challenge on his hand at the moment, and he only lost by 2. So they are not far away here, the Sydney Kings. They are far from out of the picture, that is for sure. We know the talent that they've got. Some big injury news yesterday, of course, the Lamonte Turner situation's been discussed at length, that the Kings aren't bringing him in. They've ordered his contract after he failed a physical. I think maybe even the bigger injury news yesterday was that Sean McDonald is out for the season for Tassie. And you think about the fact they started the year 4-8. I think they were 7-2, 7-3 with him in their team. The minute he came back into that lineup, it looked different. It felt different. There was a different energy to that Tassie team. How does that change their prospects for the rest of the year, not having Shawnee Mack?
Man, it's crushing blow. That is a crushing blow to the Jack Jumpers. And your heart got to go out to Sean McDonald. I mean, he does everything the right way. I don't know him personally. Just watching the way he goes about his work, he just looks like a great teammate. So, sport can be so cruel sometimes. He got hurt in the preseason, early in the season and missed all those games. And like you said, he came back, moved Jordan Crawford to the bench, and Jordan has been playing great basketball. Now that puts a hell of a lot of pressure on Milton Doyle. Milton Doyle can no longer afford to have 1 point a game. But I don't want to go down that path. But just about Sean, I don't know how the Jack Jumpers overcome this one, Joe. Seriously. I mean, with Will Magnay scheduled to probably not come back until playoffs start, they might not make the playoffs, JP. They might not make it now. I just don't see. I mean, and you can't ever count them out because they're the champs. They're the Jack Jumpers. And Scott Roth, it seems like the rougher their position, the rougher they get. The tougher it is, the tougher they get. So I'm going to be interested to see how they respond to this one. But from an emotional point of view, it's a devastating blow.
Yeah, well, I think they play every team in the run home apart from Brisbane. And they are 6th at the moment. They're 11 and 10. Brisbane are 7th, 10 and 11. Adelaide is 8th, 9 and 11. So end of the weekend, Tassie could find themselves in a lot of trouble. And part of that is the fact that tonight, Tassie hosts Adelaide down at MyState Bank Arena. So the first of these matchups between those teams jostling for position in this round at least comes tonight. And Tassie it feels like they're going to be on the back foot into this one. The only problem is, who knows what you're going to get from Adelaide?
Who knows? And right now, I'm going to lean towards getting the good version of Adelaide because this is 2 games in a row for them now. So when they went to Sydney and beat the brakes off of them, I thought, okay, that was the crisis meeting game. That was the response. Then the Melbourne United game was the revenge game. Oh, okay, that's 2 things they had to get up for. What is the motivating factor now other than making the playoffs, which should be motivating enough? But I think they're trending in the right way. I think they have found an offensive identity with all those personalities and all those egos. I saw when they all mesh and you put them in that bowl together, it makes a beautiful soup, Joe. So, and I don't think Tassie, like I said, without Will Magnay, without Sean McVay, and with Dr. Jekyll, Milton Doyle playing, I just feel like this is a right game for 36ers to come in and get it.
Yeah, and it's, not often that Tassie will have lost 2 in a row down at MyState Bank Arena, and it could happen as of tonight. Tomorrow, the early game is Illawarra, New Zealand. That game is at the Wynn Entertainment Centre. The late game is Southeast Melbourne and Brisbane in the beautiful regional Victorian location of Traralgon. Of course, the home of Jack White, sort of Genero Hay country as well. And the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix head down there to take on the Brisbane Bullets. At the moment, the Phoenix are 5th, 11 and 10. Brisbane are a game behind, 10, 11. 2 ladder spots between them. This could be really crucial. This could almost be like a play-in preview.
It is so much going on with those teams fighting for those last 2 spots. Now, Brisbane Bullets in the Casey Prather Tour, incredible performances. Casey playing a lone hand, 1 import, 2 down, and he goes out there and gets 31 and 10 boards, 5 assists. Every time his post-game interview with his better half, don't it just warm your heart to see that? And then the Southeast Melbourne Phoenix, Joe. Now they're my dark horse. They're my sneaky tip to finish in the top 4. I just feel like they got all the pieces, and as long as they include all their pieces, namely Jordy Hunter, he's the key. I know what Matt Hurt's going to do. I know what Derek Walton Jr. and Sobey, those guys they're trustworthy these days. But if they include Jordy Hunter and Joe Wieskamp making some beautiful cameos, I see them really skyrocketing up the ladder. So, it's going to be a hell of a finish. Just when we thought 2024 could not be topped, oh, wow.
Yeah, and then we get to Sunday. So Tassie and Perth, again, another big game for Tassie down at MyState Bank Arena, and Sydney and Cairns, so the Kings get the chance to jump back on the wagon. Who do you think wins the Sunday games?
Who's playing again?
Sydney and Cairns in the late game, and Tasmania and Perth in the early game.
So, Sydney does not drop that game against Cairns, but in saying that, Cairns, you just never know. Is it a classic trap game? I think it might be. Sydney's coming in a little bit wounded, thinking, whew, at least we only got Cairns. And Kansas coming in thinking, whose party can we spoil? So I'm still going to tip the Kings, though. And Perth, New Zealand, Perth is just quietly, Joe, just not making too much noise, just quietly winning games. And they're undermanned as well. But the Bryce Cotton Show and Dylan Windler, they're just doing enough. Keanu Penders seems to be rounding this into some form, which coincides with being on the court for some significant minutes, which is always good. So, yeah, those are my 2 tips for the Sunday games.
Yeah, I like it. The last time that Tassie and Perth met, of course, down at MyState Bank Arena, we went to overtime. So that hopefully that's on the cards on Sunday as well. Damon, always great talking hoops with you. You one more?
One last thing, I forgot to mention it for that Sydney-Melbourne United game. Guards in the league. We saw Chris Golding channel his inner Davo Hickey and throw a backcourt long, crazy pass that was intercepted by Isaiah Liafa. Stop doing it. No more backcourt heaves. I just wanted to put that in there, Joe.
Yep. You can't be doing it. None of this Jared Goff action. You got to be Patrick Mahomes if you're going to be throwing those passes, Damon.
That's it.
Always good talking hoops with you. I'll see you soon.
All right, man.
Damon Lowery with you on a Friday morning. Thanks for your company on NBL Now. Big weekend of hoops coming up. NBL app, nbl.com.au, the place to check in with it all. Moments that mattered back on Monday. NBL Now back in your feed on Tuesday.